Horror fans, brace yourselves, because 2026 is shaping up to be an absolute nightmare in the best possible way. We're talking about long-awaited sequels, twisted reboots, and brand new stories from filmmakers who know exactly how to mess with your head. From post-apocalyptic cults and savage survival tales to slashers, demons, and psychological mind games, these upcoming horror movies aren't just here to scare you, they're here to make sure you don't sleep at all. And somewhere in the middle of all this madness, welcome back to your nerdy show. I'm your host, Spoiler Master, and today we're counting down the top 10 most anticipated horror movies of 2026 that will keep you awake all night. Lock your doors, turn down the lights, and let's dive straight into the nightmares incoming. 28 years later, The Bone Temple. If there was one horror film that truly split audiences recently, it was 28 years later, and The Bone Temple looks like it's doubling down on everything that made that movie so disturbing. This sequel picks up in the aftermath of Spike's traumatic involvement with Jimmy Crystal's cult, and instead of focusing on a coming-of-age perspective, it plunges headfirst into the moral decay of a world that no longer has rules. In a post-apocalyptic landscape, the worst people are no longer hiding, and the Bone Temple seems obsessed with showing what happens when monsters are finally free to be themselves. The trailer hints at a far more brutal and psychologically aggressive film, one that leans heavily into cult ideology, ritualistic violence, and the terrifying idea that society's collapse doesn't just create survivors, it creates predators. Jimmy Crystal's cult, reportedly inspired by real-world monsters, looks to be even more grotesque this time around, and the film appears less interested in hope and more fascinated by corruption. Expect relentless tension, shocking imagery, and an exploration of how belief systems can become weapons in a world already stripped of humanity. Send Help. Raimi returning to horror is reason enough to be excited, but Send Help sounds like a pressure cooker of psychological torment waiting to explode. The film centers on a boss and his employee, played by Dylan O'Brien and Rachel McAdams, who find themselves stranded on an island together after a disaster. What starts as a survival situation quickly turns into something far more uncomfortable as years of workplace power dynamics come boiling to the surface. There's something uniquely horrifying about being trapped with someone who has controlled your livelihood, and Send Help seems ready to weaponize that fear. As resources dwindle and isolation sets in, the question becomes, who actually has the power now? Raimi's signature madness suggests that this won't be a simple survival story, but a descent into paranoia, cruelty, and possibly even outright insanity. Rachel McAdams stepping into a horror role only adds to the intrigue, especially if the film leans into revenge, psychological manipulation, and the thrill of watching the tables turn in the most brutal ways possible. Psycho Killer. Serial killer horror never really goes out of style, but Psycho Killer looks determined to push the genre into darker emotional territory. The story follows Jane, a cop whose life is shattered after her husband becomes a victim of the so-called satanic slasher. Instead of focusing solely on the killer, the film appears deeply invested in Jane's unraveling as grief, obsession, and rage blur the line between justice and self-destruction. Georgina Campbell leading the film is a major reason this one stands out. After her chilling performances in Barbarian and The Watchers, she's proven she can anchor intense horror with emotional weight. With very little revealed about the killer or the plot twists, Psycho Killer feels like the kind of movie that thrives on slow burn tension, shocking reveals, and a protagonist who may not emerge unscathed, physically or morally. It's the kind of grounded horror that feels disturbingly plausible, which often makes it far scarier than anything supernatural.
Please don't go any further.
Return to Silent Hill. Few horror franchises inspire the kind of devotion that Silent Hill does, and Return to Silent Hill is shaping up to be one of the most anticipated game adaptations in years. This film is a direct adaptation of Silent Hill 2, widely considered one of the greatest psychological horror stories ever told. Christoph Gans returning as director adds a sense of continuity, especially for fans of the 2006 film, but this time the focus is far more intimate and emotionally devastating. Rather than relying on jump scares, Return to Silent Hill is expected to lean into guilt, grief, and psychological punishment. The fog-covered town isn't just a setting, it's a manifestation of inner torment. If the film stays true to the game, audiences should prepare for disturbing symbolism, unforgettable creature designs, and a narrative that leaves you questioning reality long after the credits roll. This isn't just a horror movie, it's an emotional descent into hell disguised as a mystery.
Terrifying for you.
Ready or Not 2? Here I Come. Against all odds, Ready or Not became one of the most beloved horror comedies of recent years, and Here I Come looks ready to embrace the chaos all over again. Picking up directly after the first film, Grace is once again pulled into a deadly game involving the ultra-wealthy, only this time the stakes are even more personal with her sister dragged into the nightmare. The cast alone makes this sequel impossible to ignore, with Samara Weaving returning alongside Catherine Newton, Sarah Michelle Gellar, David Cronenberg, and Kevin Durand. Everything about this movie screams blood-soaked satire, blending brutal kills with sharp commentary on privilege, entitlement, and survival. Even if it doesn't surpass the original, Ready or Not 2 feels like it understands exactly why audiences fell in love with the first film and plans to push those elements to their absolute extremes.
Did you see that she is poison?
Forbidden Fruits. Forbidden Fruits is one of those horror films that thrives on mystery, and the less you know going in, the better. Centered around a witchy cult run almost entirely by women, the story takes a turn when a new girl starts working at their store and begins unraveling secrets best left buried. The teaser trailer keeps its cards close to its chest, hinting at rituals, manipulation, and a creeping sense of dread rather than outright scares. With horror veterans like Victoria Pedretti and Alexandra Shipp involved, expectations are high for layered performances and emotional depth. This looks like a film that blends feminine rage, occult horror, and social tension into something both unsettling and empowering. Rather than relying on cheap shocks, Forbidden Fruits seems poised to lure audiences in slowly before revealing its true intentions in the most unsettling ways possible. Scream 7. Just when you think Scream has said everything it needs to say, the franchise pulls you back in. Scream 7 marks a major turning point with Kevin Williamson returning to direct, bringing things full circle. The return of legacy characters like Sidney Prescott, Gale Weathers, Stu Macher, and Dewey Riley raise massive questions, especially considering some of these characters are very much dead. That mystery alone is enough to fuel endless speculation, but the film also continues the newer storyline with Mason Gooding and Jasmine Savoy Brown returning. Scream 7 feels like it's positioning itself as both a celebration and a reckoning for the franchise, possibly blending meta-commentary with full-blown fan service. Whether through twists, retcons, or bold narrative risks, this installment promises to keep audiences guessing until the very end. Evil Dead Burn. The Evil Dead franchise refuses to slow down, and Evil Dead Burn sounds like another vicious evolution of its relentless formula. While details remain scarce, the title alone suggests a scorched earth approach to demonic horror. If recent entries are anything to go by, this film will likely deliver non-stop intensity, grotesque practical effects, and a complete disregard for audience comfort. What makes Evil Dead so enduring is its ability to reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity of chaos, possession, and brutal survival. Evil Dead Burn feels poised to push the franchise into even darker territory, possibly exploring new settings or mythologies while keeping the trademark insanity intact. This isn't horror you casually watch, it's horror you endure. The Bride. Reimagining classic monsters has always been risky, but The Bride looks like it's embracing that challenge head-on. A modern, horror-forward take on the Bride of Frankenstein mythos, this film reportedly leans into themes of autonomy, creation, and rage rather than romance. Instead of being a tragic accessory to someone else's story, The Bride takes center stage as a force to be reckoned with. Early buzz suggests a visually striking film that blends gothic horror with contemporary sensibilities. If done right, The Bride could join the ranks of successful monster reimaginings that respect their roots while offering something bold and relevant. Expect atmosphere-heavy storytelling, haunting imagery, and a protagonist who refuses to remain in the shadows.
Hold the darkness, you can't keep it away.
One more nightmare waiting in the dark. What makes the 2026 horror lineup so exciting isn't just the variety, but the confidence. These films aren't afraid to be weird, brutal, emotional, or deeply uncomfortable. Whether it's cults in a ruined world, survival stories that turn psychological, or slashers that dig into grief and obsession, this year feels like a turning point for the genre. If even half of these movies live up to their potential, 2026 could go down as one of the strongest years for horror in a long time. These are the kinds of films that don't just scare you in the moment, they linger, haunt, and crawl back into your thoughts when the lights go out. Sleep while you can, because nightmares are definitely incoming.
No, what the heck, I'll laugh anyway.